Have you ever wanted to chat with me or ask me individual questions about the games I feature? You now can. Join the Discord if you want to do so. Thank you.
Hey everybody, so originally I was going to make this in 2 parts, and then I realized that part 2 was like half the length of part 1, so I'm just going to cut all of those parts out and just make it one longer video about like 40-ish minutes. Enjoy. Hello everybody. I've been thinking about for a few months trying to make an updated perk guide. I decided to wait until after Of Flesh and Faith because I didn't want to do it and then have the meta change. So this is right after the new DLC came out, and I want to finally get it out because I had made it previously many hours ago in my playstyle, and I think my opinion has changed, and I think the community's opinion and community's playstyle has kind of changed, and that has affected how I want to do this perk video. So, other thing that held me back was I wanted to make it interesting. There is an amazing perk tier list and guide. I say it's amazing because it's by 2 great players, some Weird Sins and Grave Bees. So they did a traditional like S, A, B, C, D perk tier list. That's actually on this same video. You can find this Brother Brothers perk tier list maker. If you view community rank, you can find theirs on there. And then, you know, Filthy has his perk guide, which is outdated, but Filthy's a good player. Other players, I'm sure, have done their own just perk guides. And I felt like, you know, that's what I did the first time, just sitting there. And I wanted to do something a little bit different, something more interesting. So, what I've devised now is, I'm using the tier list website, but what I want to do is talk about the perks, and then talk about where they're best used for. And maybe a build to go along with every single one of them. I think I want to make this in-depth, because I want to make this a long-standing resource for everybody to go with, you know, for basically until they change it, which I don't know if they necessarily will, because Battle Brothers is kind of old at this point. So, because this is just me giving my thoughts, there won't be a big amount of like video stuff. So if you just want to turn this into like a podcast and just listen to it while you drive or whatever, that's fine. I wouldn't necessarily I would watch this while you play or something. But let's just get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the actual categories. So I have them as like best what? So best early game bros. So this includes like fodder or like day 1 dudes or whatever. Best as a tempo perk. Tempo perk is a term that means that it gives you a very strong power boost at right now, even though it might not be that useful later. We'll get into those as we get there, but one example is dodge. Dodge, level 3 at day 3, means you have like 100-ish initiative, so you're getting like 10 melee defense. 10 melee defense is pretty huge. So it gives you a really strong power spike right at the beginning, even though not every brother needs dodge in the late game. But if the guy's not going to make it there anyway, he might as well take that tempo perk now. Best late game damage. This is stuff like Berserk, because it's a level 8 perk. You're not going to get there till a while. It's obviously very good. No, that's a really simple category, I think. Best for tanks. Or this could be ways to mitigate damage as well, is another way that you could do that. And that's, I think, kind of self-explanatory. I think tanks are different because they don't rely on DPS, but they still have some perks that are useful for them. Then we have best. You have a specific plan. This might be something like footwork, or resilient, where the perk isn't like I wouldn't go around and say like footwork is like bad, like just like it's like, oh my god, you ruined your save because you picked footwork on one guy. But it's, you know, you're gonna have to, I feel like you have to have something in mind with footwork. Like, I'm not just picking footwork for the hell of it. Then we have best, necessary for a build to work. Otherwise, it's like fine, I guess. So that again is just like, some things are like axe spec, or really a lot of the weapon specs. If you're going for a stim neutral build, they're actually necessary to have weapon spec. But otherwise, like, how often do you really take axe spec? Like, not much. It's not that great, but it's good. It's necessary for this like one type of build. So that's kind of thing. If a perk sucks, I'm still going to tell you guys that it sucks. But I also put it in a category. But, you know, if we're listening to this, you'll just hear me. So if you skip to the end, then that might be a little bit of a problem. As you might see, like, oh, best for this, but you didn't. If you just skip, you maybe didn't hear me like actually explain the perk. But whatever. So let's get right into it. First one is Executioner. Where would Executioner go? Probably you have either late game damage or you have a specific plan. Now, if you're going with like throwers with Executioner is quite good. Javelins can cause a lot of injuries. The new thing that I'm thinking of is Headhunter. Headhunter just got a massive buff of Flesh and Faith, which means that it's actually really consistent and probably good for a lot of late game damage. And thus, you can proc a lot of head injuries, so Executioner is really good. So I'm going to put this in late game damage. I think there's enough uses, I think especially with the Headhunter buff, I think we're going to start seeing, I'm calling it right now, guys, that we're going to start seeing Headhunter, Executioner, Crippling Strikes on... Maybe not Crippling Strikes, but Headhunter Executioner on a lot of late game damage builds. Someone said replacing Fearsome in a comment. I don't know about that, but this is going to be a new thing. So I'm going to put this here in anticipation for that. Bullseye. Bullseye sucks. Bullseye is, I think, the worst perk in the game. Why? Bullseye makes bad ideas better, is the way I've heard it said like a million times. Like, okay, so I'm trying to shoot a brigand marksman behind two different guys with shields in the front. Okay, I have a 19% chance to hit him. Oh man. Oh wait, I'll take Bullseye. Now I have a 34% chance to hit him. Awesome. You have a terrible idea to hit that guy, and your chance has almost doubled from 19 to 34. What a shit like thing that you have here. That's one of your 10 perks, I hope you realize. Bullseye just like sucks. Bullseye is good if you're making like an archer build and you're role playing and you're having fun that way, then awesome. And like I just want to say, if you're role playing or like have some kind of thing like that, then none of this matters because you're role playing. Who cares how good you are if you're role playing? Have fun. That's totally fine. But if I'm here to talk about how good perks are, and Bullseye fucking sucks. So I'm gonna say you have to have a specific plan. You have to be like, yeah, I'm role playing a master archer, or I'm like trying this like really, really niche something build, and that's the only time I would ever consider using Bullseye, and even then I wouldn't do it probably. Dodge is a tempo build perk. It's also also good for tanks, also good for late game damage. I think it's best as a tempo perk. I kind of gave it away in the example, but it's great for that early game power spike of defense. Range defense, so you can take on more ranged like marksman camps and nomad archer camps. And melee defense, so your like trash tanks can survive more, and your soon to be nimble frontline can do that as well. So dodge is very good perk. I think Filthy Robot says he doesn't like dodge. I think that's very silly. I think dodge is a very, very strong perk. Even a minimum of like 5 to 8 dodge is like, that's like a multiple gifteds right there, kind of. Fortified Mind. Fortified Mind, I'm not a stan of Fortified Mind. Late game damage, like it's good for Bannerman, of course. Like your Bannerman is 100% taking Fortified Mind. Other than that, tanks might want Fortified Mind. Fatigue neutral builds, which are builds that only use 15 fatigue per turn, so they can always swing once and attack, and never have to worry about not utilizing other perks like Berserk because they don't have enough stam. They can like Fortified Mind because they're not pumping stamps, they just pump Resolve. I think it's honestly like okay. I think it's like good. I'm gonna put it here in necessary for a build to work. I think. Oh, I don't know. I think I'm kind of stretching the category of necessary. It's great for certain builds. Otherwise, it's like fine. I don't think everybody needs Fortified Mind. I think it's situationally really good. Otherwise, like just kind of nice. So this is someone will not watch the video and then be like, "Why'd you put it there?" But we all know that they didn't watch it, so it's fine. Resilient. I think resilient is you need to have a specific plan. You're the Hexen Hunter. Or more likely, I think Deductor has a good way of saying it, is you're an initiative build that doesn't want to get staggered, dazed, insect plagued, poisoned, or anything else. All of those debuff your initiative horribly. So resilient makes it so you don't get that horribly. Also, initiative builds like fencers are all nimble. Or a lot of them are, like 90% of them are probably nimble and thus bleed. So I think resilient is not that good overall. It's one of my least favorite perks, but I think it has like a very, very niche aspect. Steel Brow. Steel Brow I think is best for tanks. I don't quite believe in Steel Brow is necessary for late game damage dealers. I hear a lot of people say that. It's like, it's like in the 1% edge case where you get headshot by a chosen with a mace and almost die, you should have Steel Brow. I'm like, okay, you're not wrong. How about, though, I just don't let that happen to me because I'm good. So that's a pretty crass way of saying it. But I think Steel Brow is best for the dudes that are actually going to get hit a lot. You could arguably say it's for, like, nimble... I think it's probably best on, like, nimble forge dudes who have heavy body armor and, like, 40 hats. That's probably really good. So this is a tank or mitigating damage. I could even just... yeah, I'm not going to change the category. But it's probably good for that. I think it's a good perk. I just think, like, Colossus is probably better, or not just not getting hit, or positioning. Like, if you actually play with positioning well, and you move around the battlefield correctly, you really won't need Steel Brow that much, because you shouldn't be getting swung at that much. And that's just me. Quick Hands. Quick Hands is great as a late game damage perk. I don't think it's quite a tempo perk. I think a lot of builds are centered around it. And I think a lot of late game builds, like, the like meta, so to say, is throwers, Quick Hands, and Quick Hands reach 200 builds, Quick Hands. There's talks at length about those builds. I think Quick Hands is an amazing perk, one of the best perks in the game. And, you can probably watch the Weird Sins and Grave Bees video, and they'll talk about it at length as well. Gifted. Gifted is a great tempo perk. Basically the definition of a tempo perk. You lose a perk point to gain stats now. Somebody's only making it to level 5 before they die. Might as well give them more stat points, because they're not going to lose a perk, because they're not even getting them all. Gifted's also great on tanks. For that extra bit of melee defense, resolve, HP, stand. Those are multiple stats that they want. I find I almost always want to take Gifted on a tank. But as a tempo perk at level 2, it's amazing. I did a esport tournament for Battle Brothers about almost a year ago on Pogo Reborn's channel, which, if I remember, I'll try and link in the description. And that I used Adrenaline Gifted Colossus on, like, all my brothers, and it led to some interesting results. I'm not going to spoil the tournament, but I found some success using Gifted on, like, fucking everybody. So there we go. Backstabber, probably a tempo perk, or maybe best on early game. It's probably best on early game, is what I would say. I think there's between the two of them, I'm not a huge fan of Backstabber. Oftentimes I'd rather just get somebody who's good, rather than use Backstabber, but that's okay. I think those two categories are kind of in the same, although tempo I feel like describes dudes that are going to make it to 11, or at least make it to, like, 9 or 10, whereas early game bros is more like the fodder, like, really shit dudes. So that's where I think Backstabber goes. I'm personally not a fan of Backstabber that much. I think the usual surround bonus is usually fine, and if you can't hit with that, you might be taking on too strong of an enemy, although maybe I'm just projecting. Anticipation. I don't like Anticipation. I don't like range defense in general. I know some people do. And I almost... this is quite the irony, is that in almost every video where I have live gameplay, you can hear me cussing out, I hate throwing weapons. Like, stop throwing weapons. Stop throwing arrows and javelins and the kitchen sink at me. But I don't take anticipation and I don't level range defense ever. Why is that? Because if you have 10 or 20 or 30 range defense, they'll miss you, the enemy AI. But you know who they'll shoot? They'll shoot the guy next to you who's got like 5 range defense, and they'll hit him anyway. Okay, so you give the next guy 30. Okay, well then they'll shoot the guy next to him who has 5. So you basically have to give everybody 30 range defense, or 20, or whatever your number actually is. And then you just don't give it to anybody, because they're gonna find somebody, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to take anticipation on every dude on the team, so I don't take it on anybody. Yeah, maybe that's not the smartest move, but I think once you get to a certain point, archers and late game enemies stop being super useful. So this is probably best as a tempo perk. Early game, or even early game bros, like dudes that can eat some ranged hits, and then by the late game, you've kind of stopped caring about ranged hits too much. So then this kind of falls off the wayside. Fast adaptation is another tempo perk. I really dislike fast adaptation, but I understand it's very good. For the longest time, I would like never use fast adaptation because I just hate the concept of it. In principle, I'm like, I would just rather have a guy who's actually good at the game and can hit things than have to use fast adaptation. But I understand that as a tempo perk, it's really good because at the time when you don't have that good aim, fast adaptation helps you greatly. So I will begrudgingly say that it's a good perk. I just am like taking a long time to warm up to it. Shield spec. Shield spec's really actually good on early game trash tanks. Also really good on regular tanks. I think I want to put it here to emphasize that oftentimes I'm not using shields on anybody that's not a tank. And that's not a carve specific thing. That's what most people do. But a lot of people, maybe if you're new to the game, here's an anecdote. The first Let's Play I ever watched of Battle Brothers was Filthy Robot Season 7, the challenge run. And in his challenge run, he used no two-handed weapons, except for famed ones. So, you have to imagine he made a lot of shield bros and a lot of duelists, because that's all that was left. So me, not knowing how to play the game, followed along. And I built a guy who was he was like a flail, hammer, double spec shield bro. And then once I realized, then he like ended up getting a two-handed bro. Because he got a famed weapon at the end of the campaign, and I saw what the two-handed bro did. And I go back to my own game, and I start using a little bit of two-handed bros, and I look at the flail, hammer, double spec shield bro, and I go, what in the fuck am I doing? Like, this guy's useless. So I fired him. But, like, I don't think shield bros are that great, for DPS. I think, like, a shield overwhelm tank with a dagger, that's something. But I think, like, shield damage dealers, for the most part, are not that good. If you're trying to make a fatigue neutral dude, go, like, reach advantage and, like, a Bardiche or something like that. Or I guess not, you know what I mean. Like, there's a lot of other builds where you just kind of, like, not use a shield and still be fine on the defense, because you're not leveling into fatigue. So, I don't think shield spec is that good for a lot of builds that aren't tanks. Brawny, I think, is also really good for tanks. I think, I'm not a huge expert on this, but with the advent of fatigue neutral builds, the development of those in the most, like, recent 6 months, Brawny has, I think it's kind of shifted away from being useful for all Battleforge damage dealers, because you can just come up with fatigue neutral ones, and you don't quite have to level as much stam. So I think Brawny is good for, like, initiative, especially, like, Battleforge initiative tanks, or Battleforge dodge builds, because you still get that initiative back and more stam, which helps your Battleforged, but and then it also helps you gain that initiative, so you can still benefit from dodge. That's a very, very hard concept to build around. Relentless. Relentless is probably... Where would I put Relentless? It's not quite a tempo perk. I think Relentless, I might put it in necessary for a build to work, otherwise okay. Because I think if you're gonna use Relentless for a specific build, it's probably really good for that build. But like a lot of builds I don't think need Relentless. Relentless is a very, very niche perk. So maybe it's best you have a specific plan. Maybe that's what it is. And maybe this bottom category is really bad, but I was going to use it for all the weapon specs. Just to kind of delineate a little bit of a difference there. I think it's kind of similar to Resilient, where you want to have an initiative build, and you don't want to lose out to like stagger, or in this case, passing your turn, which is really quite good. But not a lot of builds I think need it. Rotate. I think Rotate best on early game bros. Also best on tanks, but I'm actually going to put it in best on early game bros. I think you can make late game tanks without Rotate. I have done that, and I really wish I had Rotate. But I think it's honestly better on early game tanks to put themselves in really bad positions. Having Rotate... Rotate's a tough perk. Rotate is an excellent perk to have on like 2 to 3 bros on your team. Everybody having Rotate, that's like a 2016 strat. That's not that good, but having Rotate on your team is excellent. So that's what I'll say. I think everybody kind of knows what Rotate is. I think we should also maybe mention that Rotate can be used offensively. I have a video on that. It's like how to use Taunt and Rotate offensively. So maybe check that out, and if you want to learn about how to make your Rotate game a little bit better, in which case it is good on late game tanks. Next is Rally. Rally is necessary for your banner to work. Otherwise, Rally is a bad perk. Like if like you don't take Rally except on your bannerman. Like that's just how the game is. So yeah, not much more to say about that. Taunt, quite good on early game bros. I think it's actually underrated as your like 3rd or 4th perk. Get the shield wall down. Hey, oh shit, I'm facing a 2-handed Reaver on day 12. I'll just taunt him. Like there's a lot of things you can do with taunt. It's got to go to tank though. I have a whole video on taunt. It's like an ode to taunt, my favorite perk in the game. That unfortunately has not reached as many people as I has hoped it would, because like I said, it's my favorite perk in the game. At least at the time it was. That doesn't mean it's the best, but I think it's really good. And I think that there's a lot of it really defines my playstyle, because I can be a lot more aggressive because I have taunt, because I can redirect a lot of the aggro that I can get on dudes back to my tanks, and thus I don't have to worry about being a little bit over aggressive, or I can compensate for some little mistakes I have. I have a whole weapon spec video talking about all these weapon specs. So we'll do crippling strikes first, and then we'll get into those. Crippling strikes. Like I said, late game damage. I think we might see this on late game damage. Probably also you have a specific plan. It's not necessary for a lot of builds, except for like the Shamshir Duelist. So maybe it's a little bit more niche than late game damage. But I feel like if we start seeing Headhunter and we're trying to proc a lot of injuries, I think we honestly might see late game damage coming out with crippling strikes. So I've talked about that a little bit earlier in the video, so I won't repeat myself. We'll do probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more perks, and then we'll cut to the second video where we'll do all the weapon specs and these other ones. Reach advantage. Reach advantage is, I think you probably have to have a specific plan. It's not necessary for anything. I don't think it's quite a tempo perk. I don't think it's not good for a tank, of course. I think there are certain builds that highly benefit from reach advantage, like 2-handed cleavers or 2-handed swords and hammers, where you do the AoE all the time. But you don't necessarily need it for late game damage. So I think there's specific builds that help you use reach advantage to its greatest effect. Overwhelm. Overwhelm, again, I think is you have to have a specific plan. Or honestly, it could even be necessary, otherwise okay. I'm not a huge fan of Overwhelm, honestly. I think Overwhelm, there are some builds that it's almost necessary, like handguns. Overwhelm handguns are great. Overwhelm sword lances are great because or daggers are great because you're getting so many stacks of overwhelm that it becomes useful. If you have overwhelm on a two-handed axe and you swing once and all you do is overwhelm them like with one stack, that's pretty dog shit. But 3 stacks with a dagger is really good, and like it's 1 stack, but on like 5 dudes with a handgun, that's also pretty useful, especially if you have like multiple handguns. So that's what I would say. Is it's like pretty bad. It's like not relevant for a lot of builds because you're not going to even have the initiative to use it. But on certain builds, it's quite defining, or you would always take it. Colossus. Where does Colossus go? Everybody. I take Colossus on, I think, literally every single brother in the game. Yeah, I don't even know where to put Colossus. It's gonna be you have a specific plan, which is play the game. I like literally just take Colossus on everybody. Why? Nimble Brothers, they want Colossus for more HP because Nimble needs HP. Battleforge Brothers, I take Colossus so I can have more HP, which means I can have more stam. So let's say a Battleforge Brother needs 85 hit points. Define your own number, but I'm gonna say 85 for this example. So he has like 66 hit points or whatever. Then you take Colossus, and that gets him to, I don't know, like 81 or something. Then you level him once on a max roll, he gets 85 hit points. Now, you never have to level hit points again. You've basically got yourself like 5 HP levels that you can then pump into stam, and you get way more stam because you've already hit your HP benchmark. That's why I think Colossus is good on everybody. There's no reason I would never not take Colossus. It's also a tier 1 perk. A lot of the tier 1 perks besides Student are kind of ass. So I would just put it, give it to somebody so I can advance up the perk tree and get to the perks I actually want to take. Lone Wolf. I think it's also you need to have a specific plan. I don't know. You could put it in tanks. I think it's too late in the perk tree to say early game bros. And I don't think it's ubiquitous enough for all the builds to say tempo perk. So I think it's a mix between like late game damage or tanks. But I don't really like tanks. I'd rather have my tanks next to my formation so I can taunt them. That's just me. So you have a specific plan, which is like you want to make a guy for Monolith or something. Like that would be, or Kraken. Like that would be the plan for Lone Wolf. Underdog. Underdog is of course best for tanks. So I'm just gonna put it there. I think for late game damage though, I really like Underdog. What I like Underdog for is I don't want to have to play with some of my frontline having Underdog and like half Underdog, half not, and have to remember who has Underdog and like how can I put him in this position? Oh crap, he doesn't have Underdog, he's gonna die. I usually just give Underdog to all of my frontliners because I realize that at some point in the game, there's going to be a situation where I got to put somebody in a tough spot and Underdog is going to help them. So it's equally really good for late game damage. It's not equally good. It's very good on late game damage. Of course, it is necessary on a tank though. So maybe you could even put it here. Necessary for a build to work, otherwise okay. Necessary for tanks, otherwise really good on late game damage. Otherwise, kind of okay. You don't need it on all late game damage. So maybe this is where I should put it. What did we have? I think 2 more. Footwork. I'm gonna say you need a specific plan. If you can kind of tell, besides for Colossus, the rest of these are like perks that aren't very good. But there's probably like a niche scenario where you want them. Footwork on archers, I think is really bad. Better situation, just don't get run on your archers. But I'm playing against Chosen, and they just run around and they get on my archers. Don't bring archers to Chosen fights. Cool, awesome. But I have a thrower and he doesn't have a melee weapon. Take bags and belts and give him a melee weapon. Cool. Or give him a fucking shield or something. Like, you're probably already taking bags and belts on your throwers anyway. Might as well not take footwork and just take a fucking shield and shield wall, because footworking somewhere, they'll just run onto him again. So footwork, I think, is like pretty garbage. Actually, I think it's probably better to be used aggressively than defensively. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just really missing something. Maybe I'm really hyped up on my straw man example there, and I'm missing something. But I just have like never used footwork except on like one fencer, and I regret doing that. Berserk. It's late game damage. And Late game damage, it's pretty obvious. You get all that AP back. This is pretty much necessary for late game damage. I think almost all builds except for fatigue neutral builds should be taking Berserk, or at least they will utilize Berserk to a great extent if they're late game DPS. So Mace spec is really good for early game bros. I think it's probably best, or maybe even as a tempo perk, one of these two. Tempo perks are perks that give you benefits now at the cost of a perk point later. You know, push the tempo of what you're doing is kind of the idea. Temporal, even, as it's very timely. That's my Latin roots. So I think either one of these, mostly for the stun chance. I think the stun chance is good. The fatigue cost is really quite nice as well. So either one of these. I think the flail mastery, probably best for late game damage. But also you need to have a specific plan, or even probably this one. Necessary for a build to work for like a flail headhunter build, which I'll have a video out for like either already or soon, depending on when this is out. This is necessary for that build to work, of course. Otherwise, flow spec, you just don't use it. So that's basically how a lot of these are going. Late game damage, hammer spec, I think is really good. I think hammers are one of the better specs for there's the build of like the corner man reach advantage hammer underdog bro. So takes all those perks and he just like uses the AoE a bunch to like guard your corner. He's not quite a tank, but he's got really good melee defense and he's battle forged. So that's kind of the build. That's why I think that's good. Axe spec sucks ass. Axe spec is terrible perk, but it's necessary for fatigue neutral builds for that portion, so that's where that goes. Cleaver spec, I think, is also great for late game damage. You get more bleeds, you make the whip better, for the people that still want to use the whip, and the fatigue reduction, and you swing twice with cleavers, so that's good. Sword spec, I think this is necessary for fatigue neutral swords, which are not very good, or a fencer, or a Shamshir duelist. There are some sword dudes out there that need sword mastery, otherwise sword mastery kind of sucks. Dagger mastery, same thing. Dagger, overwhelm, whatever, otherwise I would never pick it. Polearm mastery, late game damage. Polearm mastery is actually excellent, an excellent perk. The ability to move 5, to move 2, and swing with a polearm on any terrain ever, and up hills, because you're gonna have Pathfinder, makes your entire team very flexible. And then quick hands, polearm, net, or one-handed AP weapon, great. I love polearm spec. It's an amazing perk. Spear, same thing. I think this you have a specific plan. I think spear spec actually is just bad. And I wouldn't use it. So you have to have a specific plan for that. I think this is again the like not very good tier. It's my euphemism for not very good, except for Colossus, which is the specific plan for Colossus is you're gonna play the game. Crossbow spec, I think late game damage. I think crossbow spec is really good for late game damage. If you're gonna crossbows do hold up well. I think throwers have higher DPS, but crossbows are good range. Like ranged range, supposed to be like 3 tiles range. So late game damage. Bows are fucking terrible. Sorry. Specific plan. You're gonna want a bow. You're gonna have a named bow. There's gotta have some reason to use a bow. Crossbows are just better, according to most people that play the game, but not you if you have a different opinion. But that's okay. Throwing. Honestly, throwing spec, I almost want to put it late game damage is so true. Like, totally true. But I want to put it in tempo. Mostly to catch the people that didn't watch the video off guard. But second, to also say that early game, if you get like 58, if you have like a hunter with no stars, you give him like gifted fast adaptation and like throwing spec, he's actually not that bad with like javelins on early game. He's not good, and he's not going to be around to level 11 hopefully, but he's actually kind of there. And I would recommend trying that at least. So Also here, but throwing here. Throwing is some of the best DPS. So just try that. Headhunter. I think we're calling it. With this, I was calling it last video. I'm gonna call it this video too because I made it, you know, like right after. Executioner, Crippling Strikes, Headhunter on late game damage dealers. We're gonna start seeing it. With the way the Headhunter works, if you start proccing head hits with hammers and flails and maces, we're basically gonna be our own chosen that just one-shot everybody. So we're gonna start seeing Headhunter be really good. If I'm wrong, probably necessary for a build to work or specific plan. But I think it's a good specific plan, not like a bow spec specific plan. Nimble, tempo perk, one of the best tempo perks. So it's day 45. You have Braider Mail. How are you going to fight these camps? Oh, let me take Nimble. Now I have my effective HP increased by hundreds of percents. Okay, cool. That's why Nimble's good. I don't think it's great for late game damage or tanks necessarily. I think late game Battleforge is way better, but it's harder to use because you just need so much stam. So Nimble is a great tempo perk. Battleforge, I'm going to put best for tanks. I think you can make damage dealers can be Nimble or Battleforged. Tanks, I think, are best as Battleforged. Nimble tanks are good. I make a lot of Nimble tanks. But Battleforged tanks are just better. Just like they have longer sustain, and they don't lose to bleeds as much, and they don't lose to fearsome as much. Because they can actually just ignore the HP damage for a while. Fearsome late game damage. Easy late game damage. There's talks at length at fearsome. I don't want to go into it here that much. Because there's so many other resources out there. But fearsome shorthand, if you hit somebody, imagine overwhelm. Here's what overwhelm does. If you go before them and you overwhelm somebody, they lose 10% melee attack for that turn. Here's what fearsome does. You hit them, break their morale. They lose 10% of their melee attack, ranged attack, melee defense, ranged defense, and resolve. Permanently, unless they go back up. But if you do it again, they lose 20%. And you do it a third time, they're fleeing. That's what breaking morale does. So that's really good. Late game damage duelist. It's a last tier perk. Of course, it's a late game perk. Of course, it's a damage dealing perk. That's obvious. Duelist is just really good. You could be like specific plan because you don't use it on two-handers. That's really stupid to say. Of course, you're not using it on two-handers. Surprised I even kept it on throwers, but whatever. Killing Frenzy. I think late game damage as well. I give Killing Frenzy to almost all my DPS. I think all my DPS are going to get kills pretty equally in late game. So I just kind of give it to everybody and don't really worry about who has it and who doesn't. 9 lives. Early game bros. Early game trash tanks. 9 lives. Saves lives. 9 lives is really good. Do I think it's overpowered? No, unless you're talking about Necrosavants. I don't think it's quite a tempo perk. I don't think it's quite as good late game. I think Colossus is better because it prevents injuries. Or it increases your injury threshold. But 9 lives is quite good. And they just buffed it and made it a lot better. So, procs to 9 lives. Indom, tanks. Obviously. Indom is a great perk. I take it on almost all my tanks. And I think that it's probably fallen off use from damage dealers with the Indom nerf to make it 5 AP instead of 3. But it's still a very good perk and necessary. You could even say this, necessary for tanks, otherwise not very good. But I'll put it here. Bags and belts. That is good for throwers, good for bannermen, good for nuts. Probably put it here. Some builds really require bags and belts or tanks for like the 15 shields you want, and for the extra fatigue on shields. Otherwise, it's okay. A lot of builds just don't want bags and belts at all, but it's good overall. Pathfinder. I'm gonna put this with Colossus here at the end. So your specific plan with Pathfinder is you want to play the game, because it's so good. Pathfinder on everybody. If you put Pathfinder on everybody, it's okay. The only people that probably don't want Pathfinder are tanks, because they're going to want to recover. They're like Shield Wall, Indom, Taunt. They build up so much fatigue that they actually would want to recover. Everybody else, though, and maybe Duelists. Duelists that want to kill recover, maybe they want recover. But even so, they'd benefit from Pathfinder. Pathfinder is so good. Necessary for fatigue neutral builds, as we all know, if you know what those are. And Pathfinder is just an excellent choice for polearm. It's necessary for polearm builds. Great overall, amazing perk. Adrenaline. I'm gonna put early game perk. I've talked at length in multiple videos, many videos, about Adrenaline as your first perk. On a lot of throwaway brothers, it's amazing. There's so many things that you can use Adrenaline for. So just watch all of those. Watch like one of those videos. I think there's like the Adrenaline guide. I'll link that in the description of this video. And that's great. Recover. Best for tanks. I kind of talked about it with Pathfinder. Recover is best for tanks. Don't use Recover on everybody. Pathfinder is better. I used to use Recover on everybody, and I'm like, you know, I use Berserk all the time. I'm really using Recover all the time. I don't really need Pathfinder. Like, how often am I really just moving once and swinging and not getting kills? And then I started thinking about it and playing and watching myself. Yeah, I do that all the time. Just use Pathfinder. You're gonna use the one hit swing, whatever, a lot more than you actually use Recover. If you really count how many times you use Recover, it's not a lot. So people have stopped using it as much as they used to. Student. I think it's a tempo perk. I think. No, it's the definition of a. I mean, I guess it's the definition of a tempo perk, right? Like XP now for a perk point later. Or perk point now for a perk point later. It's fine. I think student on most dudes, it's probably good at level 5. The good thing about student is once you get to a certain point, like let's say you don't want to pick a weapon spec, because you just don't want to commit to one yet. You take student and then you get to underdog and the 6th level perks. So that is a really good way to use student, is to boost yourself up. Student, I think, has the best, mathematically best returns at level 5, is what I was told. So taking student at level 1 is not that useful. Definitely don't take student at level 1. Because the XP to level 2 is, like, not a lot. So you're actually not gaining that much. You'd rather take the other perk. At level 5 is when it starts working out a lot for you to take student. So, that was my Of Flesh and Faith perk guide review. If you disagree, shut up. It's my channel. No, if you disagree, comment about that. That would be, I'd like to have that discussion. Of course, watch the tier list guide if you want to hear more about, from Grave Bees and some weird sins. There's also the Filthy Robot guide, which is outdated. It's only for Blazing Deserts and it's kind of old, but Filthy is a very good player, so I'll link that as well. Pogo Reborn has some roundtable discussions, which I took part in most of, for the first level of perks. So I can link that playlist as well if that's a playlist, or just link one of them. There's a lot of good content out there. So hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.